Marcus Chun knelt in his garden, dirt caking his weathered hands as he carefully transplanted a tomato seedling. The morning sun cast long shadows across his modest backyard in suburban Denver, and the only sounds were birds chirping and the distant hum of traffic. At 67, his black hair had turned silver at the temples, and his face bore the quiet lines of a man who had seen too much but chosen peace. The doorbell shattered the tranquil moment. Marcus frowned, wiping his hands on his gardening apron. He wasn't expecting anyone, and his neighbors knew better than to disturb him during his morning routine. The bell rang again, more insistent this time. "Coming," he called, his voice carrying a slight rasp from decades of cigarettes he'd quit 20 years ago. He opened the door to find two people in crisp military uniforms standing on his porch. A woman with general stars on her shoulders and a younger man with colonel's insignia. Behind them, 3 black SUVs lined his quiet street, and Marcus could see the barely concealed bulges of sidearms under their jackets. "Marcus Chin?" the general asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Depends who's asking." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, his casual posture betraying none of the lightning-fast assessments his mind was making. 3 escape routes, 2 potential weapons within reach, 6 probable hostiles in the vehicles. General Sarah Martinez, United Earth Defense Command. "This is Colonel Thompson." She held up her identification. "We need to speak with you about a matter of planetary security." Marcus studied her face for a long moment. Young for a general, maybe 45, sharp eyes that had seen combat. The kind of officer who had earned her rank through blood and bullets, not politics. He respected that. Planetary security? Marcus stepped back and gestured them inside. "That's a new one. Coffee, please." As Marcus led them to his modest kitchen, General Martinez took in the surroundings. Family photos lined the walls. A daughter's wedding, grandchildren at various ages, Marcus in hiking gear atop mountains. Nothing that suggested the man who had once been the most feared operative in the world. Marcus poured 3 cups of coffee from a pot that was clearly part of his morning ritual. His movements were precise, economical. Even making coffee, there was something about the way he moved that made Colonel Thompson's hand drift unconsciously toward his weapon. "So," Marcus said, settling into a chair across from them at his simple wooden table, "what brings the military to my door? I've been retired for 15 years. My security clearance expired a long time ago." General Martinez exchanged a glance with Colonel Thompson. "Sir, are you familiar with the Galactic Confederation? The aliens that made contact 3 years ago?" "Sure. Hard to miss when tentacled beings start broadcasting on every frequency." Marcus sipped his coffee. "Though I hear they're actually pretty friendly. Trade agreements, technology sharing, that sort of thing." "That's correct. What you might not know is that there's been a significant development." Martinez pulled out a tablet and placed it on the table. "The Confederation has been at war with another alien species called the Vorthan Empire for over 2 centuries. Marcus nodded slowly. "Let me guess. The Vorthans found out about Earth. 2 days ago, the Vorthan Empire sent an ultimatum to the Confederation. They're claiming Earth as a military asset and demand we surrender unconditionally." Martinez touched the tablet, bringing up an image of massive, angular spacecraft. "These ships appeared at the edge of our solar system yesterday. The ships were clearly built for war. Dark metal hulls bristled with weapon arrays that could glass a planet." Marcus had seen enough military hardware in his time to recognize instruments of genocide when he saw them. And the Confederation's response? They've invoked something called the right of challenge. It's apparently an ancient law that allows disputes to be settled through single combat rather than fleet engagement. Colonel Thompson leaned forward. "One champion from each side. Winner takes the contested resource." Marcus set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "And you want Earth to provide a champion?" "The Confederation has already selected theirs," Martinez said. "A warrior called Kethmore from the Regelian species. 10 feet tall, for arms, skin like armor plating. It's reportedly killed over 1,000 enemies in personal combat." "Sounds impressive." Marcus's tone remained conversational, but something had shifted in his posture. "What does this have to do with me?" General Martinez took a deep breath. "Sir, we've consulted with every military branch, every intelligence agency, every special forces unit on the planet. We've run psychological profiles, combat simulations, and genetic assessments. when we asked our supercomputers to identify Earth's best chance of winning this challenge. Every analysis came back with the same recommendation. She pulled out a classified folder and placed it on the table. Marcus could see his own face on the cover photo, but it was from 30 years ago. Younger. Harder. The man in that photo had eyes like winter. You. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Outside, a neighbor was mowing his lawn, and somewhere a dog was barking. Normal sounds from a normal world that was apparently about to be fought over by aliens. I'm 67 years old, he said finally. I grow tomatoes. I read bedtime stories to my granddaughter. I haven't held a gun in 15 years. Sir, we know about Prague. We know about the Kabul incident. We know about the thing in Myanmar that officially never happened. Colonel Thompson's voice held a mixture of respect and fear. You're the only human being to ever achieve a perfect mission success rate across 17 years of active operations. That was a different man. Was it? General Martinez leaned forward. Sir, the man who eliminated the Kozlov cartel in a single night was precise. Methodical. The man who infiltrated the Tehran facility and extracted 7 hostages without firing a shot was patient. Strategic. She gestured around his peaceful kitchen. The man who grows award-winning tomatoes and builds tree houses for his grandchildren. That's the same precision, the same patience, the same strategic mind. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at his garden. The tomato seedling he'd been transplanting sat half-finished, dirt still scattered around its new home. You don't understand what you're asking. We understand that without someone to represent Earth, the Vorthans will strip mine our planet and enslave what's left of humanity. Martinez's voice hardened. We understand that you're the only person on Earth who has a chance. And if I refuse, then we find the next best option and hope it's enough. She paused. But we both know it won't be. Marcus was quiet for another long moment. Then he turned back to them, and something in his expression made both officers sit straighter. Tell me about the arena. Tell me about the rules. Tell me everything. For the next hour, General Martinez laid out everything Earth knew about the challenge. The arena was a neutral space station controlled by an ancient AI that had overseen such challenges for millennia. No weapons beyond what a beam could carry. No outside assistance once the combat began. The fight continued until one champion died or surrendered. The Vorthan Empire had never lost a challenge. When? Marcus asked. Transport leaves in 6 hours. The challenge is scheduled for tomorrow, ship time. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll need my gear. It's in storage. Sir, we took the liberty of retrieving your equipment. It's in the vehicles outside. Colonel Thompson hesitated. All of it. Marcus almost smiled at that. Including the case marked property of God. That one required special authorization from the president. Now Marcus did smile, and, for just a moment, both officers glimpsed the man from those classified files. Good. I'll need it. As they prepared to leave, Marcus walked through his house one more time. He stopped at a photo of his daughter and granddaughter at last year's Christmas dinner. His granddaughter, Amy, was 7 and had insisted on putting the star on top of the tree herself. He picked up his phone and dialed. Hey, sweetheart, he said when his daughter answered. Is Amy there? I wanted to tell her a story. Dad, it's the middle of the morning. She's at school, right? Of course. Marcus paused. Sarah, tell her that Grandpa went on an adventure. And tell her that everything I taught her about being brave, now's when it matters most. Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on? I love you, sweetheart. Both of you. More than all the stars in the sky. He hung up before she could respond. 20 minutes later, Marcus Chun walked out of his house for what might be the last time. He wore simple civilian clothes, but the way he moved was different now. Purpose had replaced the peaceful shuffle of retirement. His eyes, which had been kind and grandfatherly that morning, now held depths that made hardened soldiers look away. The case-marked property of God sat in the back of the lead SUV. Inside were tools that had once reshaped the world, one precisely placed death at a time. As they drove toward the spaceport, General Martinez studied the man beside her. Sir, can I ask you something? Shoot. Why did you really retire? Your file says personal reasons, but you were at the peak of your abilities. You could have kept going. Marcus watched the familiar streets of Denver roll past. You ever been married, General? Divorced. Occupational hazard. I was married to Elizabeth for 38 years. She died of cancer 5 years after I retired. His voice was soft. You know what her last words to me were? Martinez shook her head. She said, "Promise me you'll choose love over war." So I did. He looked directly at her. But Elizabeth never met any aliens threatening to enslave our granddaughter. The spaceport came into view, and, with it, a ship unlike anything built on Earth. Sleek, impossibly beautiful, it looked like it had been grown rather than constructed. "That's a Confederation transport," Colonel Thompson explained. "They've agreed to take you to the arena." As they approached the ship, a figure emerged to greet them. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with azure skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Her arms moved in graceful, coordinated gestures, and, when it spoke, the words came through a translation device at its throat. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Regelian Republic. You are the human champion." Marcus stepped forward and extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, the alien clasped it with one of its 4 hands. "Marcus Chun, pleased to meet you. I must warn you, human. The Vorthan champion is a creature bred for war. It knows no mercy, no honor, no fear. Are you certain this is your choice?" Marcus looked up at the towering alien, then back at the case containing his gear. "Ambassador, I spent 40 years learning how to kill things that weren't supposed to die. Tomorrow, I'll find out if I learned well enough." As they boarded the alien transport, Marcus felt the familiar weight of purpose settling over him like an old coat. The engines hummed with power beyond human understanding, and, within moments, they were ascending toward the stars. Earth fell away beneath them, a blue marble suspended in the vast darkness. Somewhere up there, in the cold between worlds, an arena waited. And, in that arena, the fate of every human being who had ever lived would be decided by an old man who just wanted to tend his garden. But gardens, Marcus reflected as he watched his home world shrink to a point of light, sometimes needed protecting. And he had always been very good at protecting the things he loved. The journey to the arena took 18 hours in hyperspace, a concept that made Marcus's head ache when Ambassador Veltar tried to explain it. The interior of the Confederation transport was both alien and oddly familiar. Curved walls that seemed to breathe, lighting that adjusted automatically to his presence, and gravity that felt exactly like Earth despite their impossible speed through folded space. Marcus spent the first few hours in his assigned quarters, a surprisingly comfortable chamber with a viewport showing the swirling colors of hyperspace. The case-marked property of God sat unopened on the desk, a black carbon fiber rectangle that had traveled with him across 3 continents, and through conflicts that would never appear in history books. He opened it with the same reverence a priest might show when handling sacred relics. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, lay the tools of his former trade. A modified Sig Sauer P226 with custom grip work, its barrel threaded for the suppressor that lay beside it. 3 ceramic combat knives, each balanced for different throwing distances. A compact medical kit containing everything from morphine to battlefield stimulants. Flexible body armor that could stop rifle rounds while remaining thin enough to hide under a dinner jacket. And, at the bottom, wrapped in black silk, the reason the case required presidential authorization to open. Marcus lifted out a device no larger than his palm. To anyone else, it would look like a sophisticated phone or tablet. In reality, it was a quantum encryption communicator linked directly to a satellite network that officially didn't exist. With this device, he could call in airstrikes, nuclear submarines, or covert operations teams from anywhere on Earth. Not that it would help him where he was going. A soft chime indicated someone was at his door. Marcus carefully closed the case and went to answer it. Ambassador Veltar stood in the corridor, accompanied by a shorter alien with copper-colored skin and 6 delicate arms that moved in constant, hypnotic patterns. "Marcus Chun, may I present Dr. Zelenaeus, our xenobiologist. She has studied Vorthan physiology extensively and wishes to brief you on your opponent." Marcus stepped aside to let them enter. Dr. Zelenaeus moved with an odd, flowing gait that reminded him of dancers he'd seen in Thailand. When she spoke, her voice carried musical undertones that the translator couldn't quite capture. "Human Marcus, I must confess myself puzzled by your selection. The Confederation's champion, Keth Moore, is a being bred specifically for combat. Your physical parameters suggest She paused, consulting a device in two of her hands. Advanced age and reduced capability. Reduced capability? Marcus settled into a chair across from them. Doctor, what do you know about human warfare? Very little, I admit. Your species only achieved interstellar awareness recently. We've been at war with ourselves for 10,000 years. We've had exactly 0 years of peace in recorded history. Marcus's tone remained conversational, but something in his posture had shifted. We're the only species that developed the concept of mutually assured destruction before we left our home planet. We built weapons that could destroy all life on Earth, then built more of them just to be sure. Dr. Zelenaeus's 6 arms had stopped their constant motion. That seems inefficient. Maybe, but it made us very good at killing things. Marcus looked directly at her with eyes that had seen the darkest corners of human nature. Doctor, in my career, I've eliminated targets that had advanced cybernetic augmentation, genetic modification, and military-grade armor. I've killed people who were faster, stronger, and better equipped than I was. How? By being more patient. By thinking 3 moves ahead. By understanding that in a real fight, there are no rules except survival. He paused. Tell me about the Vorthan champion. Dr. Zelenaeus exchanged a glance with Ambassador Veltar, then activated a holographic projector. The image that appeared made both humans and aliens look small by comparison. The Vorthan champion stood nearly 12 feet tall, its body covered in chitinous armor that looked like it had evolved specifically for warfare. For arms ending in clawed hands, legs like tree trunks, and a head that was all angles and predatory intelligence. But it was the eyes that made Marcus pay attention, black as space and utterly without mercy. This is Scarthek, the Bloodrender. It has never been defeated in personal combat. Its species, the Vorthans, practice something they call evolutionary warfare. Each generation is bred to be larger, stronger, and more aggressive than the last. Weaknesses? Few. The armor plating is nearly impervious to energy weapons. Its reaction time is approximately 3 times faster than baseline human. Its strength is... Dr. Zelenaeus consulted her device again, sufficient to crush your skull with minimal effort. Marcus nodded, as if they were discussing the weather. What about endurance? Heat tolerance? Pain response? Exceptional across all categories. The Vorthans are apex predators from a high-gravity world with a hostile environment. They're essentially evolved to be perfect killing machines. Perfect, Marcus smiled, and the expression made Ambassador Veltar take an unconscious step backward. Doctor, do you know why humans became the dominant species on Earth? I assume superior intelligence played a role. Not even close. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most intelligent species our planet produced. We became dominant because we're persistence predators. Marcus stood and walked to the viewport, watching the colors of hyperspace swirl past. We don't kill by overwhelming force. We kill by never, ever stopping. He turned back to them. A persistence predator chases its prey until the prey exhausts itself. Then, we kill it while it's too tired to fight back. Humans can run continuously for hours. We can track wounded prey for days. We can go without sleep, without food, without water longer than almost any other creature on Earth. But the arena combat will not last for hours, Dr. Zelenaeus protested. Won't it? Tell me about the arena rules again. Ambassador Veltar activated another hologram, showing a circular platform perhaps 100 meters across. The surface appeared to be some kind of adaptive material that could simulate different terrains. The combat continues until one champion dies or yields. No weapons beyond what can be carried. No outside assistance once the challenge begins. The arena itself is neutral. It will not favor either combatant. What about environmental controls? Can the arena simulate different atmospheres, gravity levels, temperatures? Yes, but the AI that governs the arena traditionally maintains standard conditions unless both champions agree to modifications. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his mind already working through possibilities and contingencies. I'll need detailed specifications on the arena's capabilities. Atmospheric composition, gravity variance, temperature ranges, everything. May I ask why? Because, Ambassador, your champion is going to try to end this fight quickly with overwhelming force. My job is to make sure that doesn't happen. Marcus returned to his chair, but his entire demeanor had changed. The gentle grandfather was gone, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. How long until we arrive? 14 hours. I'll need access to your ship's gymnasium or training facility. And I'll need to speak with your tactical officers about Vorthan combat doctrine. After the aliens left, Marcus opened his case again and began the ritual he'd performed before every mission for 17 years. Each piece of equipment was inspected, tested, and checked against a mental inventory that had kept him alive when lesser operatives died. The knives were still perfectly balanced. The pistol's action was smooth as silk. The flexible armor showed no signs of deterioration, despite 15 years in storage. He powered it on for the first time in 15 years and entered a code that should have been changed decades ago. To his surprise, it connected immediately. A voice answered after the first ring. Lazarus Protocol. Verification required. Marcus closed his eyes. Lazarus Protocol was the most classified project in human history, a contingency plan for threats that conventional military forces couldn't handle. It should have been discontinued years ago. Reaper 7-7 Alpha. Authorization Omega Black. Reaper 7-7 Alpha. This is Control. We show you his retired status. Not anymore. There was a long pause. Stand by for verification. Marcus waited, watching hyperspace swirl past his viewport. Somewhere in a bunker buried under the Colorado mountains, quantum computers were analyzing his voice patterns, retinal scans taken through the communicator's camera, and a dozen other biometric markers. Verification confirmed. Welcome back, Reaper. What do you need? I need everything you have on the Vorthan Empire. Military doctrine, physiological data, psychological profiles, everything. That's a xenobiology request. Outside our normal parameters. Control. In approximately 13 hours, I'm going to fight an alien the size of a truck in single combat. The survival of the human species depends on me winning. I'd say that falls well within your parameters. Another pause. Stand by. For the next 6 hours, Marcus absorbed information at a rate that would have impressed his old trainers. Vorthan society was built around ritualized combat. Their entire civilization was a pyramid with the strongest at the top and the weak culled regularly. They had no concept of mercy, no understanding of surrender that wasn't temporary tactical retreat. But they also had weaknesses that Dr. Zelen A.S. hadn't mentioned. They were adapted to a high-gravity world with a thick atmosphere. Their impressive physical capabilities came at the cost of efficiency. They burned through energy at an incredible rate when exerting themselves. Most importantly, they had no experience fighting humans. They had fought dozens of alien species over the centuries, but never anything like a human persistence predator. They were used to quick, decisive battles where superior strength and aggression won the day. They had never faced an opponent who would simply refuse to die, no matter how much punishment they absorbed. Marcus spent the remaining hours in the ship's gymnasium, a space that adapted itself to his movements like something out of a dream. He ran through combat forms he hadn't practiced in years, feeling muscle memory reassert itself despite his age. His movements were slower than they'd been in his prime, but they were also more economical, more precise. Experience, he reflected, had advantages that youth couldn't match. 2 hours before they were scheduled to arrive, Ambassador Veltar found him in the gymnasium, moving through a series of knife-fighting exercises that looked more like a deadly dance. Human Marcus. I speak with you? Marcus completed his form before turning to face the alien. Of course. I've been thinking about our conversation earlier. About persistence predation. About human warfare. Veltar's 4 arms moved in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as a gesture of respect. I believe I may have underestimated your species. Most people do. The Confederation has fought the Vorthan Empire for 2 centuries. We have lost every major engagement because we cannot match their aggression, their willingness to accept casualties, their simple joy in violence. Veltar paused. But you speak of these things as if they are tools to be used, not drives to be obeyed. They are tools, very dangerous ones. Marcus toweled off and sat on a bench that formed itself on the floor. Ambassador, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did your people agree to let a human represent Earth in this challenge? You could have insisted on providing your own champion. Veltar was quiet for a long moment. Because, human Marcus, in all our studies of your species, we discovered something that terrified us more than the Vorthans ever could. And what's that? Humans are the only species we've encountered that has never been conquered. Every world in the Confederation has been invaded, defeated, occupied at some point in their history. But not Earth, not humans. Veltar's translator struggled with the next words. Your people have a saying, they may kill you, but they can't eat you. We find this disturbing and encouraging in equal measure. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the alien gymnasium. Ambassador, we have another saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. I do not understand. You will. An hour later, the transport dropped out of hyperspace near a structure that defied easy description. The arena was massive, a sphere of gleaming metal and crystalline elements that seemed to bend light around itself. Ships from a dozen different species floated nearby. Representatives come to witness what many believed would be humanity's final stand. As their transport docked, Marcus performed one final equipment check. Everything was in place, every contingency planned for. The knife in his boot, the backup weapon in his sleeve, the small device hidden in his belt that would either save Earth or get him killed in the attempt. Human Marcus, Dr. Zelenaeus appeared at his door, her 6 arms moving in patterns that suggested agitation. I have been running final calculations on your probability of survival. And less than 3%. I wanted to apologize. For doubting you, yes, but also for being unable to provide better intelligence. You seem like a good being. I regret that you will likely die for our failures. Marcus looked at the alien scientist, seeing genuine distress in her alien features. Doctor, can I tell you something my granddaughter said to me last week? Of course. She was having trouble with a bully at school. Bigger kid, mean as a snake. She asked me what she should do. Marcus smiled at the memory. I told her that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. He stood and collected his gear. Today, I'm scared out of my mind, but I'm also going to do the right thing. As they prepared to disembark, Marcus caught a glimpse of Earth through the arena's massive viewports. A blue marble hanging in the darkness, home to 7 billion people who had no idea their fate was being decided by a grandfather who just wanted to tend his garden. The arena's docking bay was filled with aliens of every description, but they all fell silent as Marcus walked past. He was smaller than any of them, older than most, and completely unremarkable by galactic standards. But something about the way he moved, the absolute certainty in his step, made even hardened Vorthan observers take notice. The human had come to fight for his world, and somewhere in the depths of the arena, an ancient AI awakened to oversee another challenge, wondering if this small, quiet creature might actually surprise everyone, including itself. The arena of ancients was older than most civilizations in the galaxy. Built by a race that had transcended physical existence eons ago, it hung in the void between star systems like a monument to the idea that some conflicts could only be settled through individual combat. The AI that governed it had overseen 10,000 challenges across the millennia, and never once had it been surprised by the outcome. Today might be different. Marcus stood in the preparation chamber, a spherical room with walls that displayed a constantly shifting view of the cosmos. Stars wheeled past in silent majesty, and somewhere among them was the small yellow star that warmed Earth. He wondered if his granddaughter was looking up at the night sky, thinking about him. The chamber's AI spoke with a voice like distant thunder. Champion of Earth, you have 1 hour to prepare. State your requirements for the arena environment. Marcus had spent considerable time thinking about this moment. Standard Earth gravity. Standard Earth atmosphere. Temperature 20 degrees Celsius. Arena surface to simulate rocky terrain with elevation changes up to 10 meters. Acknowledged. Do you require weapons beyond those you carry? No. There was a pause that might have been confusion if AIs could feel such things. Champion, are you certain? Previous champions have requested additional armament. The Vorthan champion carries traditional weapons. I'm certain. The AI's sensors examined Marcus with scanning beams invisible to human perception. What it found defied its predictive models. The human was old by his species standards, carrying the accumulated damage of a long and violent career. But beneath the surface the AI detected something that its vast database struggled to categorize. This human was not afraid, not confident in the way of warriors who had never truly been tested, not desperate in the way of those fighting hopeless battles, simply unafraid, as if death was an old acquaintance rather than an enemy. In the opposing preparation chamber, Skarthek the Bloodrender performed ritual preparations that had been unchanged for 1,000 years. The Vorthan champion stood 12 feet of evolved killing machine, its chitinous armor gleaming under artificial light. Her arms moved through combat forms that could shatter stone, and its black eyes burned with an intelligence that existed solely to calculate the most efficient ways to kill. Skarthek had fought representatives from 17 different species over its career. Some had been strong, others fast, a few had been clever. All had died. The human would be no different, merely another skull to add to the collection that adorned its personal quarters. The Vorthan's AI briefing had been thorough. Humans were soft-bodied bipeds with minimal natural armor and no significant physical advantages. They compensated with tool use and pack tactics, neither of which would be available in the arena. The challenge would be over in minutes. What the briefing hadn't mentioned, because no Vorthan database contained the information, was that humans were the only species to develop concepts like acceptable losses and Pyrrhic victory. They were the only creatures that had ever looked at a no-win scenario and decided to rewrite the rules. As the hour countdown reached its final minutes, representatives from across the galaxy gathered in observation galleries surrounding the arena floor. The betting had been fierce, with odds heavily favoring the Vorthan champion. A few prescient observers had noted that the odds seemed almost too lopsided, but chalked it up to human overconfidence rather than any genuine threat. General Martinez watched from the diplomatic gallery alongside Ambassador Veltar and Dr. Zelenas. The journey from Earth had taken its toll on her. She looked older than her 45 years, weighted down by the knowledge that she had potentially sent humanity's greatest asset to die in an alien gladiator pit. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "what happens if Marcus loses?" Veltar's forearms moved in patterns that conveyed deep regret. "The Vorthan Empire will claim Earth as a military resource. Your people will be repurposed for their war machine. Slaves. The concept translates poorly, but yes. Those deemed useful will serve. Those who are not." Veltar left the sentence unfinished. Dr. Zelenas leaned forward, her 6 arms weaving patterns of nervous energy. "I've been analyzing combat records from the arena's database. The average challenge lasts 14 minutes. The shortest was 47 seconds. And the longest? 6 hours, 23 minutes. That was between 2 champions who were perfectly matched in all relevant categories." She paused. "The human champion possesses no such advantages." General Martinez said nothing, but privately she wondered if any of them truly understood what they had unleashed. The man she had recruited from his garden wasn't just a retired operative. Marcus Chun was the end result of 40 years of human warfare refined to its absolute essence. He was what happened when intelligence, training, experience, and pure stubborn were compressed into a single individual and pointed at a problem that needed solving. The arena AI's voice echoed through the galleries. "Champions, proceed to the arena floor." 2 doorways opened in the massive sphere that formed the arena itself. From one emerged Skarthek, moving with the predatory grace of an apex predator. Its 4 arms carried traditional Vorthan weapons. A plasma cutter that could slice through starship hulls, a gravity hammer that could crush bones to powder, throwing blades that could penetrate most known armor, and a neural disruptor that could overload nervous systems with agonizing pain. From the other doorway stepped Marcus Chun, looking impossibly small in comparison. He wore simple black combat fatigues and carried no visible weapons. To observers who had never seen human warfare, he appeared helpless. Those observers were about to receive an education. The arena floor materialized around them, rocky terrain that rose and fell in natural-looking formations. Boulders provided cover, and scattered cliff faces offered tactical advantages to those clever enough to use them. It looked like a dozen different worlds where battles had been fought across the galaxy's history. The 2 champions faced each other across 50 meters of broken ground. Skarthek raised its weapons in a gesture of ritual challenge, its alien voice booming across the arena through translation systems. Human, I am Scarthek the Bloodrender, heir to 1,000 victories. I have broken the champions of 17 worlds. Your death will be swift, as befits a warrior. Marcus simply nodded, his hands empty at his sides. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly despite its quiet tone. I'm Marcus. I'm here to protect my granddaughter. If the Vorthen was puzzled by this response, it showed no sign. The arena AI began its final countdown. Champions, prepare for combat. The challenge will commence in 10 seconds. Marcus closed his eyes and let 15 years of peace fall away like shed skin. In its place rose the cold certainty that had carried him through missions on 6 continents, through firefights in jungles and deserts, through night raids where the margin between success and failure was measured in heartbeats. 5 seconds. Scarthek flexed its 4 arms, weapons glinting in the arena's artificial light. Its species had conquered worlds through simple, brutal efficiency. Apply overwhelming force, crush resistance, move on to the next target. 3 seconds. Marcus opened his eyes, and General Martinez felt her blood turn to ice. She recognized that expression from classified footage, from after-action reports that were buried so deep they might as well have been myths. This was the face Marcus Chun wore when he stopped being a grandfather and remembered that he was death walking in human form. 1 second. Begin. Scarthek exploded into motion with the devastating speed of its species, all 4 weapons tracking toward the small human who had dared to challenge the might of the Vorthen Empire. Marcus was already gone. He moved with the fluid economy of someone who had spent decades learning that the shortest distance between 2 points was rarely a straight line. As the Vorthen's plasma cutter carved through the space where he had been standing, Marcus was sliding behind a boulder formation, his mind already 3 moves ahead. The Vorthen's attack pattern was exactly what he had expected, overwhelming force applied with technical precision. For weapons working in perfect coordination, designed to leave no avenue of escape. It was the kind of assault that would have devastated any conventional opponent. But Marcus had stopped being conventional a long time ago. He pulled the first knife from its sheath as Scarthek rounded the boulder, the ceramic blade catching light for just an instant before it left his hand. The throw was perfect, striking the Vorthen's primary optical organ and sliding off harmlessly, which was exactly what Marcus had intended. Scarthek stumbled, blinking instinctively, and in that fraction of a second Marcus closed the distance. Not to attack. That would have been suicide. Instead, he dove between the alien's legs, rolling to come up behind it as the gravity hammer pulverized the boulder where he had been hidden. The neural disruptor swung toward him, and Marcus felt the weapon's field wash over him like liquid fire. His nervous system screamed in protest, every nerve ending suddenly, blazing with artificial agony. A normal being would have collapsed. A smart being would have surrendered. Marcus had been tortured by professionals on 3 continents. He grunted, staggered, and kept moving. Scarthek spun to track him, confused by the human's continued mobility. The neural disruptor should have incapacitated any biological being. Yet the small creature continued to move, continued to evade, continued to be exactly where it shouldn't be. For the first time in its long career, Scarthek experienced something its species had no word for, doubt. In the observation galleries, Dr. Zelen A.S. leaned forward, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. How is he still moving? The neural disruptor should have paralyzed his entire nervous system. Ambassador Veltar's 4 arms moved in patterns of growing amazement. I am beginning to understand why the humans were so confident. General Martinez said nothing, but a grim smile played at the corners of her mouth. She had read Marcus's psychological profiles, knew about the conditioning that had allowed him to function under torture that would have broken lesser minds. Scarthek had just discovered that its most reliable weapon was useless against someone who treated pain as just another source of tactical information. The challenge had been underway for less than 3 minutes, and already the Vorthen champion was learning that everything it knew about combat was about to be redefined by a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Marcus put his back to a cliff face and waited for the next assault, his mind calculating angles and distances with the precision of a machine built for killing. The Vorthen would come again, probably with the plasma cutter leading to force him into the open where the other weapons could finish him. When it came, he would be ready. He thought of his granddaughter's laugh, of tomato plants waiting to be transplanted, a small blue world hanging in the darkness. Then he pushed those thoughts away and let the hunter emerge fully. Some legends, he reflected, never truly retire. They just wait for the world to need them one last time. The dance began in earnest as Scarthek adapted its tactics to the humans' unexpected mobility. The Vorthan champion was a creature of vast intelligence, bred and trained for warfare across multiple star systems. It recognized that its initial assessment had been flawed and began to adjust accordingly. Marcus watched the alien's posture shift, saw the change in weapon positioning that indicated a transition from overwhelming assault to methodical hunting. The Vorthan was learning, which made it infinitely more dangerous than a simple berserker. Good. Marcus had always preferred intelligent opponents. They made fewer mistakes, but when they did fall, they fell harder. Scarthek began its new approach with the plasma cutter, using the weapon's reach to probe Marcus's defenses while keeping its other arms ready to exploit any opening. The superheated energy blade carved through stone like paper, sending molten fragments scattering across the arena floor. Marcus gave ground, seemingly retreating along the cliff face as the alien advanced. To observers, it looked like the inevitable beginning of the end, the small human being systematically cornered by a superior opponent. Even Ambassador Veltar's 4 arms drooped in what his species considered a gesture of mourning. They didn't understand that Marcus wasn't retreating. He was positioning. The plasma cutter swept toward him in a horizontal arc designed to bisect him at the waist. Marcus dropped to one knee, feeling the weapon's heat wash over his head, and drove his second ceramic knife up toward the joint where the Vorthan's arm met its torso. The blade shattered against chitinous armor without penetrating, but that wasn't the point. The strike forced Scarthek to adjust its stance, shifted its weight distribution for just a moment, and gave Marcus the opening he had been waiting for. He rolled forward under the alien's guard, and came up inside its reach where the longer weapons couldn't track him effectively. For a heartbeat, he was in the most dangerous position imaginable, surrounded by 4 arms that could crush his skull, his back exposed to weapons that could vaporize him. Instead of attacking, Marcus did something that no Vorthan tactical doctrine could have predicted. He grabbed on his Scarthek's leg with both hands and held on. The alien tried to shake him loose, stumbling as its balance shifted unexpectedly. In Vorthan combat philosophy, an opponent either attacked or retreated. The concept of simply clinging to an enemy while doing nothing else was so foreign that Scarthek wasted precious seconds to try to process this new development. Marcus used those seconds well. His enhanced earpiece, disguised as a simple hearing aid, had been recording and analyzing the alien's movements since the combat began. Built with technology that pushed the boundaries of human engineering, it had identified something that Dr. Zelenas's briefings had missed. Scarthek's armor was indeed nearly impervious to conventional weapons. But like all biological systems, it had joints, flex points where mobility required reduced protection. The alien's left rear leg showed microscopic stress fractures from centuries of combat, hairline weaknesses that would be invisible to the naked eye, but which Marcus's enhanced optics could detect. He let go of the alien's leg and rolled away just as the gravity hammer came down where his head had been. The weapon pulverized stone into powder, but Marcus was already moving, drawing his third knife as he came to his feet. This time, his throw was different. Instead of aiming for a killing strike that would bounce harmlessly off armor, he targeted the stress fractures in the alien's leg with surgical precision. The ceramic blade found its mark, driving into a gap no wider than a hair and jamming the joint mechanism. Scarthek roared, a sound that reverberated through the arena like grinding metal. The leg didn't break. The damage was too minor for that, but it introduced a slight hesitation into the alien's movement, a microscopic delay that Marcus's trained eye could exploit. In the observation gallery, Dr. Zelenas leaned forward with all 6 arms extended, her scientific mind finally beginning to grasp what she was witnessing. He's not trying to win through superior force. He's conducting, what is your human term, surgery. General Martinez nodded grimly. Precision targeting. Marcus doesn't fight opponents. He solves them. On the arena floor, Scarthek was beginning to understand that this human represented a completely new form of warfare. The small creature showed no interest in meeting strength with strength or speed with speed. Instead, it moved like water, flowing around attacks while systematically identifying and exploiting weaknesses that weren't supposed to exist. The Vorthan champion had been bred for 10 generations to be the perfect killing machine. What it faced now was something that evolution had never prepared it for, an opponent that treated combat as applied engineering rather than violence. Marcus retrieved his shattered knife blade from the ground, a ceramic shard about the length of his thumb. In anyone else's hands, it would be useless. In his, it became a scalpel designed for alien anatomy. He waited as Scarthek approached more cautiously now, all 4 weapons positioned for mutual support. The plasma cutter led, backed by the gravity hammer, with throwing blades held ready, and the neural disruptor charging for another burst of agonizing energy. When the attack came, it was perfectly coordinated, for weapons working in harmony to eliminate every possible escape route. It should have been impossible to avoid. Marcus went up instead of sideways. He sprinted directly toward the cliff face and launched himself upward, fingers finding handholds in stone that seemed too smooth to climb. For 3 seconds, he was a target silhouetted against rock, completely vulnerable to any of the alien's weapons. Scarthek hesitated, confused by the apparent suicide run. In that moment of uncertainty, Marcus reached a ledge 8 feet up the cliff face and immediately launched himself backward in a move that defied both logic and gravity. He came down on the alien's back. 12 feet of evolved predator suddenly found itself carrying 170 pounds of human determination. Marcus wrapped his arms around the alien's neck, his legs around its torso, and held on as Scarthek tried desperately to shake him loose. This close, he could feel the alien's incredible strength, the raw power that could have torn him apart with casual ease. But strength without leverage was just wasted energy, and Marcus had positioned himself where none of the alien's weapons could target him without risking damage to Scarthek itself. For 30 seconds, they spun across the arena floor in a deadly embrace that looked more like dancing than fighting. Scarthek slammed itself backward against the cliff face, trying to crush the human against stone. Marcus absorbed the impact and held on, feeling ribs crack but maintaining his grip. The alien spun and thrashed, its weapons sweeping through empty air as it tried to target an opponent who had made himself part of its own body. For the first time in its long career, Scarthek experienced something approaching panic. Marcus waited until the alien's movements became more frantic, less controlled. Then he shifted his grip, found the nerve cluster he had been searching for, and applied pressure with scientific precision. Scarthek's left arm went numb. The plasma cutter fell from suddenly nerveless fingers clattering across the arena floor. Dr. Zelenas's databases contained detailed Vorthan anatomy, but they had never mentioned the specific nerve pathways that controlled fine motor function. Human interrogation techniques had developed pressure's point applications that could induce temporary paralysis without permanent damage. Marcus had just demonstrated that those techniques worked on alien anatomy as well. The alien bucked harder, trying to throw off its passenger before more damage could be done. Marcus held on with the persistence that had made humans the dominant predators on their homeworld, his grip unbreakable despite the punishment his body was absorbing. He found the next pressure point and applied it with the same surgical precision. Scarthek's second arm began to spasm uncontrollably. In the gallery, Ambassador Veltar's 4 arms moved in patterns that his species used to express religious awe. By the ancient lights, he's not fighting the champion. He's performing some form of medical procedure. Battlefield surgery, General Martinez confirmed. Marcus was trained as a combat medic before he became an operative. He knows more about anatomy than most doctors. Human anatomy, alien anatomy, apparently it doesn't matter. On the arena floor, Scarthek made a decision that would have been unthinkable minutes earlier. It threw itself toward the ground, intending to crush the human beneath its massive bulk. Marcus let go at the last second, rolling clear as 12 feet of alien warriors slammed into the arena floor with enough force to crack stone. He came to his feet holding the ceramic shard, his eyes already calculating the next phase of his assault. Scarthek struggled to rise, 2 of its 4 arms responding sluggishly to neural commands. the alien's black eyes fixed on the small human who had systematically begun dismantling what everyone had assumed was an unstoppable killing machine. For the first time in its long, violent career, Scarthek the Bloodrender faced the possibility of defeat. Marcus stood 10 feet away, battered but unbroken, holding a broken piece of ceramic that somehow represented a greater threat than any weapon the Vorthin had ever faced. He wasn't breathing hard despite the punishment he had absorbed. His movements remained fluid, economical, precise. He looked exactly like what he was, a predator that had found prey. "Yield," Marcus said quietly. The word carried across the arena with absolute certainty. Not a request or a demand, but a simple statement of fact. The fight was over. All that remained was for the alien to accept reality. Scarthek rose to its full height, towering over the human who had somehow turned a hopeless battle into a systematic defeat. The alien's remaining functional arms raised their weapons, but there was something different in its posture now. For the first time in its life, Scarthek the Bloodrender was afraid. The arena AI watched through 1,000 sensors, its vast intelligence struggling to process what it had witnessed. In 10,000 challenges over countless millennia, it had never seen anything quite like this human's approach to combat. The small creature had turned warfare into applied science, violence into precision engineering. It had taken a contest between champions and transformed it into a masterclass in the systematic deconstruction of superior opponents. The AI found itself curious about the outcome for the first time in geological ages. On a blue world orbiting a small yellow star, 7 billion humans went about their daily lives, unaware that their fate hung in the balance. Children played in parks, lovers walked hand in hand, families gathered for dinner, all under skies that would soon belong either to them or to an empire that saw them as nothing more than resources to be consumed. In the arena, Marcus Chun prepared to finish a fight that had started the moment humanity looked up at the stars and decided they weren't alone. The dance was almost over. Scarthek the Bloodrender had killed champions from 17 worlds. It had faced beings of incredible strength, blazing speed, and cunning intelligence. Some had been larger, others smaller. A few had even been clever enough to damage its armor or temporarily disable a weapon. None had ever made it afraid. The human stood motionless, ceramic shard held loosely in one hand, and Scarthek could see its own death reflected in those calm gray eyes. Not the glorious end of a warrior's final battle, but something clinical and precise, a conclusion reached through methodical analysis rather than passion. The alien's two remaining functional weapons, the gravity hammer and neural disruptor, suddenly felt inadequate in ways that defied Vorthin understanding. How could superior firepower be insufficient against a single unarmed opponent? Marcus watched the alien's internal struggle with the patience of someone who had learned to read body language across species barriers. The Vorthin was realizing that conventional tactics wouldn't work, but its entire psychological framework was built around the application of overwhelming force. It literally didn't know how to process a situation where strength and aggression were counterproductive. "You're thinking too hard," Marcus said quietly. "Your species evolved for direct confrontation. Pack hunting, territorial disputes, simple dominance hierarchies. But you've never faced anything like humans." Scarthek's translator struggled with the human's words, but the meaning came through clearly enough. The small creature was offering discourse in the middle of mortal combat, as if they were discussing philosophy rather than fighting for their lives. "What are humans?" the alien asked, genuine curiosity cutting through its fear. Marcus smiled, and the expression contained no warmth whatsoever. "We're the species that looked at every predator on our planet and decided we were going to be the one at the top of the food chain. We didn't evolve claws or armor or natural weapons. We evolved brains and stubbornness." He began moving again, not attacking, but circling with the patience of a persistent predator. "Do you know what the most dangerous human is, Scarthek? It's not the strongest or the fastest. It's the one who absolutely refuses to stop. The one who will crawl through broken glass and barbed wire and the bodies of his enemies to reach his objective." The alien tried to track him with its remaining weapons, but Marcus stayed just outside their effective range, moving with the fluid economy that spoke of decades spent perfecting the art of survival. His voice remained conversational, almost gentle. I've been shot 11 times in my career, stabbed 16 times, tortured on 3 continents. I've had bones broken, organs punctured, and nervous systems fried by weapons you've never heard of. He paused in his circling, meeting the alien's gaze directly. Do you know what I learned from all of that? Scarthek said nothing, but its massive form had begun to tremble slightly. Not from fear alone, but from the growing realization that it faced something outside all parameters of normal existence. I learned that pain is just information. Death is just an outcome. And outcomes can be changed if you're willing to pay the price. Marcus resumed his movement, and now there was something hypnotic about the way he moved, like a snake preparing to strike. The question is, what price are you willing to pay? In the observation galleries, the assembled representatives watched in stunned silence. This wasn't combat as they understood it. The human had transformed a physical confrontation into something closer to psychological warfare, systematically dismantling his opponent's mental defenses while positioning for the final strike. Ambassador Veltar leaned toward General Martinez, his 4 arms moving in patterns of barely controlled amazement. Is this typical of human combat doctrine? No, Martinez replied quietly. This is Marcus being polite. Dr. Zelenius overheard and turned all 6 of her arms toward the human general. Polite? He has systematically disabled 2 of the champion's limbs and appears to be conducting some form of psychological manipulation. How is this polite? Because he offered to let Scarthek surrender. Twice. Martinez's voice carried the weight of someone who had read classified files that would give nightmares to hardened military officers. When Marcus stops being polite, people don't usually survive to talk about it. On the arena floor, the deadly dance continued. Scarthek made another attempt to close distance, swinging the gravity hammer in a wide arc that would have pulverized a building. Marcus flowed around the attack like water, the weapon passing so close to his head that displaced air ruffled his gray hair. As the alien's momentum carried it past, Marcus moved with the speed of striking lightning. The ceramic shard found another nerve cluster, this one controlling the alien's balance and spatial orientation. He applied pressure for exactly 2 seconds before dancing away from the inevitable counterattack. Scarthek staggered, its inner ear equivalent sending conflicting signals to a brain that suddenly couldn't determine which way was up. The massive alien crashed into a boulder formation, sending tons of rock cascading across the arena floor. Marcus waited patiently for the dust to clear, checking his equipment with the methodical precision that had kept him alive through 40 years of warfare. 3 ceramic knives broken or lost. Flexible body armor showing stress fractures from multiple impacts. Ribs definitely cracked, possibly broken. Blood loss minimal, but increasing. Most importantly, the small device hidden in his belt remained intact and functional. Scarthek emerged from the rubble like a force of nature, but its movements were no longer coordinated. The alien's proprioception was damaged, making it unable to judge distances accurately or maintain proper balance. What should have been a terrifying charge became a stumbling advance that Marcus avoided with minimal effort. "This is over," Marcus said, loud enough for the arena's sensors to record clearly. "Yield, and you live. Continue fighting, and I'll kill you." The words carried absolute conviction, spoken with the same tone someone might use to comment on the weather. There was no anger, no bloodlust, no emotion at all. Just a simple statement of cause and effect delivered by someone who had made similar calculations thousands of times before. Scarthek raised a neural disruptor, its last functional weapon, and triggered a burst of energy that would have paralyzed most sentient beings. Marcus stood in the weapon's field and absorbed the artificial agony without even flinching. "Pain is just information," he repeated. "And right now, it's telling me you've run out of options." The alien triggered the weapon again, pouring energy into an attack that should have dropped any biological creature. Marcus walked through the neural fire like it was warm rain, his expression never changing, his advance never slowing. For Scarthek, this was the moment that shattered everything it understood about combat, biology, and the fundamental nature of existence. The small human was absorbing punishment that would have killed most champions, and it wasn't even slowing down. Marcus reached the alien and placed his hand gently on its massive arm. I'm going to count to 3. If you haven't dropped your weapon by then, I'm going to do something that will hurt much worse than anything you've experienced so far. Scarthek looked down at the small creature that had somehow become the most terrifying thing in its experience. The human's touch was almost gentle, but there was something in that contact that promised immediate and absolute destruction. 1. The alien's tactical computers ran through every possible scenario, every combat algorithm in its vast database. All of them reached the same conclusion. This human was no longer bound by the normal constraints of biology or physics. 2. Marcus applied pressure to a point on the alien's arm that Dr. Zelenaeus' anatomical charts had never mentioned. Scarthek's entire nervous system exploded in agony that made the neural disruptor feel like a gentle massage. The weapon fell from nerveless fingers, clattering across the arena floor. 3. Marcus stepped back and waited. Scarthek stood swaying like a tree in a hurricane, all 4 arms hanging useless at its sides, its massive form trembling with the effort to remain upright. The alien that had never known defeat was learning what it felt like to be completely, utterly helpless. Yield, Marcus said one final time. Scarthek, the Bloodrender, champion of the Vorthan Empire, heir to 1,000 victories, slowly lowered itself to one knee in a gesture of surrender that had never been seen in the arena's 10,000-year history. The arena AI processed the moment with something approaching shock. In all its eons of existence, no Vorthan champion had ever yielded. Their species knew only victory or death, never surrender. Yet here knelt their greatest warrior, humbled by a creature that massed perhaps 1/15 of its body weight. Challenge concluded, the AI announced, its ancient voice carrying a note of wonder. Victory to the champion of Earth. In the observation galleries, silence stretched for several heartbeats before erupting into chaos. Representatives from 100 worlds tried to process what they had witnessed. Not just a human victory, but a complete redefinition of what combat could be. Marcus stood quietly in the center of the arena, looking more like a gardener who had finished a difficult transplant than a warrior who had just saved his species. He walked over to where Scarthek knelt and extended his hand. The alien looked up at him with something approaching reverence. I did not understand. You could have killed me. Why didn't you? Because killing you wouldn't solve the real problem. Marcus helped the massive alien to its feet, supporting weight that could have crushed him. Your empire sent you here because they thought overwhelming force was the answer to every question. But the universe is more complicated than that. He looked directly into Scarthek's black eyes, and the alien saw something there that its species had never encountered. Mercy backed by absolute capability. Go back to your people. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humans don't want to conquer or destroy. We just want to tend our gardens in peace. Marcus paused. But tell them also that if they threaten what we love, they'll discover exactly why we became the apex predators on our world. Scarthek nodded slowly, understanding flooding through its alien consciousness. The human had demonstrated something more terrifying than superior weapons or physical prowess: the ability to show mercy after proving dominance. It was a concept that would revolutionize Vorthan thinking for generations to come. As medical teams rushed onto the arena floor, Marcus allowed himself to be examined by alien physicians who marveled at his ability to function despite injuries that should have been crippling. The device in his belt remained his secret. A quantum communicator that had been broadcasting the entire fight to military analysts on Earth who were already beginning to understand that humanity had just announced itself as a galactic power in the most dramatic way possible. Ambassador Veltar approached as the medical examinations concluded. Human Marcus, I find myself changed by what I have witnessed today. My species has feared the Vorthan Empire for centuries. Yet you defeated their champion through methods we never considered possible. Ambassador, fear is just another form of information. The question is what you do with that information. Marcus looked up at the alien diplomat with eyes that held depths measured in decades of calculated violence. Your people are warriors, but you're also philosophers, scientists, builders of civilizations. Maybe it's time to remember that war isn't the only way to solve problems. 3 hours later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the transport, carrying him home, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. The blue marble looked exactly the same as when he had left, but he knew that everything had changed. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage not as supplicants or victims, but as equals who demanded respect. His granddaughter would grow up in a universe where humans were known quantities, where the right to exist wouldn't need to be won through single combat. She would tend gardens under open skies, read stories about heroes, and never know how close she had come to inheriting a world of chains. Marcus smiled and touched the viewport gently, as if he could reach through space to ruffle her hair one more time. Some legends never retire. They just wait for the world to need them one last time. And sometimes, when they're very lucky, they get to come home.